Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about APIs and how we can use and implement APIs using Fetch or Axios in React applications. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to catch on the next videos that coming up. Now first, let's talk about APIs. And what are APIs? Well, APIs are bridge between our backend and frontend. And when we want to get some data from our backend or database to be in our frontend, we need to use API to do that. And the way that we're going to do this in React is by built-in fetch data thing that we have in React, and then we're going to use the Axios, which is the most popular library for APIs in React. As you can see here, we got our simple React app right here opening in this web page. You can see we got our simple app.jsx, and I have some CSS here too, so we can work with this. And let's come and start coding our thing. And the API I'm going to use is from JSON placeholder. If you search it on Google, you can see here we got JSON placeholder free fake REST API. And if we click on this, if we come down here, you can see we got this /posts. And actually, this is the URL of the API that we want to use. So for now, let's move this here in our web page. And let's start coding a little bit right here. Now for simply fetching some data from our API, I'm going to create here simple function right here with the name of fetch data. And I'm going to use arrow function here. And here inside of this, we're going to use our fetch function, which is built in JavaScript to do our work. And actually, I want to have my URL here too. So I'm going to create this URL variable right here. And let's copy this URL right here, and we pass this as a string to our URL. And now we can come here and use our fetch function. So the first thing that we're going to do here is having this fetch function that I told you. Then this is going to receive our URL right here, which we have that in our variable up here. Then, as you know from previous parts and videos about promises in JavaScript, which we're going to use here, this fetch function that we have right here is going to return us something. So what we're going to do here, first let's console log this returning of our function right here so we see what it returns. And of course, we need to call this. And for calling that, I'm going to use the simple button of call the function. And we need to add our function here. So we have this on click. And here we're going to have actually this here need to be this E. And here we need to have this fetch data. And now if we open our console right here, and click on this button, you can see we received promise. And as you know from the video that we got about promises, we need to deal with this item. So here, what we're going to do is let's actually create this data variable right here, and we move this fetch URL from here to here. And then here, if we have this data here, if we refresh and click again, you can see again we got our promise right here. But now we're going to deal with that promise. And the way that we're going to do that is by having this then right here. And then inside of this, we're going to take the response that we got, and we want to have this response.json. And this simply converts the response into a JavaScript object. Then what we can do is let's get rid of this console log here first, and let's get rid of this variable too. And now here we can use this type of coding, which is more clear. And then we're going to have another then here, which is going to grab the data that we got from previous part, and let's say at first we want simply console log that data. And now by having this, if we refresh our web page and click on this button, you can see we got this array with bunch of data inside of that item. But how we're going to manage and use this in our web page? The way that we're going to do this is first having our states and states, which we're going to use that state to save our data inside of that. So we're going to have this use state, of course. We're going to import that and create a state right here. And I'm going to name that simple data that we got here. And then here, instead of console log data, we're going to have this set data to this data. And now let's actually use this fragments here too. So we're going to have multiple tags here. Let's move our button here and let's use our state right here. And here let's simply console log our data. Now if we refresh again, if we call our function, you can see here we got our items inside of our state. And because this is array, we can use our map function here too. So here at this point, let's import our style.css that you saw earlier into our component. So at the first of our file, let's use this import. It's in the same directory as our file. So we're going to have this style.css. And after having this item, let's come here. And instead of having the simple console log, let's use our data right here. Then we want to use this map. And then inside of this, we want to grab each post that we got, and we're going to do several things with that. First, we're going to have this simple div with the class name of card here, and inside of this item, actually because I want to use in different line, we can use this parentheses right here. So inside of this, we're going to have this simple h1 here, which is going to show our post's title for us. And then let's say we're going to have this simple paragraph, which is going to show our post.body for us. And now after having these items, if we click on our button right here, you can see we got our data appearing as we want right here. And actually, let's make this simple div here too. And let's add this class name of app to this one. And here you can see we got our items and we use this fetch data right here to do our stuff. And of course, we can have another button at the last of our code. So let's say here we got this simple button, and actually let's make these items in their own places. Should grab this button here too, and here let's say this is going to reset the data that we got. So here in our onClick, we're going to have this simple function which is going to set the data to simply empty array. And now you can see we got our items right here, but these are actually very large amount of posts. So let's come here, and when we want to set data, we use this dot slice, which is going to slice our array for us. And let's say we want to use 10 posts right here. And now this time if we use this, you can see we only got 10 posts. And if we click this reset, actually here we need to have another E. If we click this, it's going to be disappear. But as I told you, after the switch, we're going to have Axios, which is another way of using APIs. And that's a library that we need to install and import in our component. So first of all, let's come here and let's, instead of having this call the function, use this fetch data. And now let's come into the terminal. I'm going to create another one here. And here what I do is simply having this npm I Axios, which is going to install Axios for us. And now after we got installed our Axios, if we come here into our package.json, you can see in the dependencies part, we got our Axios right here. We need to import that here to be able to use that. So here we're going to import Axios from Axios, as you can see right here. And then here, let's come and create another function with the name of fetch data, and we add this Axios to the end of that. And this is going to be again an arrow function, and inside of this, we're going to use our Axios function that we just imported. And that is going to be this simple Axios. And then we're going to use this dot, and here we're going to put the type of request that we want to send, which in our case is going to be get request. And inside of this parentheses, we want to have our URL, of course. And after having this, you might think that we should have this converting to JSON, but actually Axios is going to do that for us automatically, so we don't need to do that. And simply we're going to have this then, and inside of this, we're going to grab the data that we got from previous part and simply set the data to the data that we got. And now we're going to duplicate this button here too. Now here in the second one, let's say we use this Axios data, and here again, we're going to use this Axios. And now here, if we refresh, nothing happens. Actually, let's restart our server here. So we're going to use this Control C and then again this npm run dev. And now here, this time you can see we got 3 buttons here, which are this fetch data, Axios data, and this reset. And actually, let's come here, and before of our reset, we use 2br tags here, so we got some space between of these items. And now this time, if we use this fetch data, you can see we got our posts right here. If we reset that, it's all going to be disappear. And if we click this Axios data, you can see our app is going to crash. And why it's happening is because of our passing the data like this. We use the same method as our fetch, but this is a little bit different. So here, instead of having the set data, first we're going to console log the data that we got from our URL to see what we got in our data. So if we click this, you can see we got the simple object here instead of that promise. And here you can see we got bunch of fields, which one of them is going to be this data, which is actually the data and array that we want. So here, instead of having this data like this, let's actually make this again, this response. And then here, instead of our response, we're going to use this data field that we got. And now this time, if we click here, if we open our console here, you can see we got this array with 100 data inside them. And of course, because we want to use only 10 of them, we're going to use our slice method here. And here we want to pass this 0 and 10. And if we reset this again, refresh and use this Axios data, you can see we got array with 10 objects and data inside of it. And now this time, if we use this set data here instead of that console log, and first let's refresh our web page, let's check our fetch data. You can see this works perfectly. Let's reset. And now if we use this Axios data, you can see we got the same thing that we wanted here using Axios. And actually, we can handle our errors and other things here too. But let's say here we want to use Axios and not fetch data. So we remove our fetch data function right here as well as its button. You can see here this time we got our Axios data, which if we click, we're going to have our data right here. But let's say we want to have our data fetched when we land on the web page, and we don't want to click an extra button to do the thing. And the way that we're going to do that is by using our use effect hook. So here we're going to have this use effect, of course, and inside of this we don't want to have this return. Here in the dependencies array, we want to be sure to this be empty, and this means this thing and this function right here is going to run when all of the components have mounted in our web page. And then here we can call our function right here, which is going to be this fetch data Axios. And after we do this, if we refresh, you can see it automatically is going to fetch data for us and show that right here. Of course, we can have this reset again here. Again, we can call our API, but we got this automatic thing going on too. And we can do this with the same fetch API function too. And the key differences between a fetch and Axios is going to be that simple JSON conversation that here in our Axios we got that automatically. If we bring our function right here, you can see in this part we need to do that manually, but in Axios is going to do that automatically. And further in the channel, when we're going to talk about the request cancellation and error handling, you can see the main differences between of these two items, which again this Axios is going to handle errors automatically for us and has its own built-in support for request cancellation, but in fetch we need to implement those items manually. We're going to talk about type of APIs and how we can use different types of APIs in our apps in further videos. So don't forget to like and hit that subscribe button to catch those videos too.